All right, I'm David Poe, and welcome to the channel. Today we're trying something new. I'm going to be doing this with a different setup than you have seen with me before. I've switched into a different room in the house to do my painting, and so I'm now practicing painting just with my Bashad box. This is a Yugo Bashad box made in the United States, and it is the largest model that they make. And one of the things that I do like about this particular Bashad box is that it's very lightweight. It does have the panel holder, which is held on by magnets. This is an 11 by 14 canvas panel that we're using today, which I've already pre-toned with burnt sienna. It also has this nice little area right here where you can put some paint dabs if you wanted to. What I've decided to use it for is to use my brushes in that space. So let me clean that off for a second. We'll see how well this goes. This is the first time I've been actually painted on this, so we'll see together. Uh, this isn't really a review of the panel holder, but if you want to see how this Yugo works in the studio environment, we can do that. I also have the Yugo tripod, which it's mounted on. I've hooked the paper towels using a bungee cord on the side. There's a little strap on the Yugo tripod, and on that I have hooked my terps, which today I'm using Gamsol mineral spirits for that. And I've also attached a plastic bag for my trash as well. You'll notice that I've got the reference work that we're going to be using today mounted here. Many of you have requested that you'd like to see how I'm translating the actual scene. So this is just a mountain scene. You'll notice a lot of purples, a lot of blues, and we've got a little bit of a creek bed. So this makes a wonderful composition. So I suppose if you were looking for how to judge that would be kind of an S composition in which we're moving in an S line with that river valley. And then, of course, the focal point is going to be, I believe, these mountains here. I want you to go right back into there, and the farthest mountains is where I want the focal point, because what we're going to do is the darkest darks are right along this edge where there's a little bit of a tree line. You see these trees here that appear very dark in this photograph. And so, and one of our lightest light colors is going to be the creek bed that's coming into that. And then we got some clouds that are hovering here around the base of these distant mountains. And so I believe that that should be the focal point of this particular composition. We also got this nice contrast of these darks here with some lighter lights in the sky, and of course this creek bed. So I think this will make for a good composition. Although I'm not a realistic artist, so keep that in mind. I am looking for impressions and what we can do with stretching some different colors. So we'll see how that goes today. Let me get set up. I like to get a couple of paper towels ready to go. Have those available to me. Today, let's go over the palette. And today I'm using brushes that, because I was looking for brushes that would fit this Bashad box, I decided to make a very light setup and wanted to be as compact as possible. And using the long brushes simply wasn't going to work. So I got a cheap set. What are these called? Royal Langnickel. I think I got them from Michael's, believe it or not. I wouldn't suggest that you always buy your supplies at Michael's, by the way. But they had this cheap synthetic brush set. There's about 5 brushes in here. I don't know what you would call this, but it's kind of a flat. We got a smaller flat. There's a rubber band that comes with the Bashad box to, especially if you have like a glass palette in here, that you want to make sure that you can make sure that the contraption doesn't come open in any way. And so this cinch is used to help close that. It also, on their demonstration videos, you could hang terps here if you wanted to. I didn't quite trust it. It was really stretching out the rubber band. So I've hooked it below on the tripod, which had a little bit of a handle loop, and it's in that loop attached with a cinch. So we've got that. and then a carabiner, not a cinch. This is a cinch. That's carabiner, um, and I'm using it instead. I didn't. There were lots of reviews that I watched online that didn't find the side trays all that valuable, and they're rather expensive. So to start with, I'm decided to try it without any of those trays. So I'm using the cinch to hold just a couple of brushes when I'm actually painting. There's room here for a few more that I've got stacked in there that I think will stay in there and not fall out. And we'll see how well that goes. So this should also help you because now you'll be able to see me mixing all the colors. The other videos you'll notice I used a Maybeth French easel, great instrument for painting, but I had to constantly remember to hold my palette up. And when you're thinking about painting and trying to also demonstrate, sometimes that doesn't go together very well. So here, hopefully, you'll be able to see, especially because I'm using the acrylic palette that came with the kit. This is not my favorite, but it certainly lets you see a little bit more of the color instead of if I had some other color or one of the glass palettes here. So I'm using just colors, no medium today. We're going to use Hansa Yellow Light. This is Naphthol Red. We've got Ultramarine Blue, Yellow Ochre, Burnt Sienna, Ivory Black, and then Titanium White. These are all from the Utrecht line. Utrecht is a paint that's manufactured here in the United States, and it's sold by Blick. So you could go to blick.com to get all of the colors that we're using today. Once again, the panel surface, this is a cotton canvas panel. It has been pre-toned with burnt sienna. And so now let's start getting into the process of painting. And what I like to do for the first step is to basically take a smaller brush. I'm going to opt to take this one out. If I can get it out of there. Let's stick this down in there for a minute. And we're going to briefly sketch in the scene on the photograph. And first, I just dip into my mineral spirits. I want this to be very, very thin. So I'm going to put that right there on the palette. A little bit of the burnt sienna. And now we're going to sketch the scene in. Now you'll notice that this mountain scene goes all the way to that corner. That can be a danger because it sends the viewer's eyes right off the page. So you got to be a little bit careful when you're doing that. So instead of doing that, I'm going to bring that mountain down here a little bit. And of course, I don't have to be super accurate at this point. I'm just getting kind of a general feel for the landscape. See the same way over here. I don't want that mountain to go all the way up to that corner. So we're going to change that a little bit. Here's where some of the detail is going to be. And then you can't really see it too well on the photograph, but there's another ridge here. And you know what? I better not put that in because it's going to confuse the viewer too much. So we're just going to lightly sketch that. There's a little bit of a different shade here, but I need to magnify that if I'm going to do it. So I've got to bring this down a little bit more, perhaps. Okay. Over here, same way, there's another one that's a little bit closer. It comes all the way down to that creek bed. Now for the kind of the horizon line, if you will. Do it kind of here. It's coming in this way. We've got a little bit of a color variation here, darker in this area. I'll kind of paint that in right now to remind myself. This is just a map of where some of these colors are going to go. We'll see how terrible these paint brushes are. I have a feeling I'm not going to like them very much. But for now, we'll try them and see what happens. Especially if you're a beginner painter, you may have a cheap set of brushes that you're starting with because you didn't want to invest a lot of money, and that's okay. I've been there and done that. All right, so we got a little sketch of where those mountains are. Now I want to take and make sure that I get a sense of how the water is coming in here. And so let's see, it comes in from this side. It's going to come in like this. It's going to kind of come in. And it disappears. Okay. The other side of it. Here. All right. So it just creates a little bit of a map. I'm not trying to be very particular at this point. And you see how some of the paint is so wet it's even running, and that's all right too. So now this is sort of my sketch. There are certainly some cloud formations up here, but I don't want to put this color up in the sky right now. So we're going to do that when we get to that point. Now, what I always try to do is start with the dark. So first off, I'm going to clean this brush. Take my paper towel, dry that off, stick it up here for the moment. And then we're going to use the largest brush that we can. And we're going to go for our darkest darks. So a little bit of Gamsol here on the palette. And starting with this, we're going to make our dark with the burnt sienna. And then a little bit of the ultramarine blue. I don't want to use ivory black for the darks. Ivory black on my palette is a color that I will only use with mixing. Otherwise, ivory black looks like you got a hole in the canvas. So you don't want that. It makes wonderful greens though when you mix it with Hansa yellow light. And that's one of the reasons I put it on here. It also helps to tone down some mixtures if they are too brilliant and too saturated, too bright. Okay. All right, so now we take this dark mixture, and where do I see the darkest dark? So the darkest darks are the moment for me. And of course, a picture, it's always best to paint outdoors and see it in person, because this looks just like a black dark mass, but it's not. There was, in fact, details when I saw this scene. So I'm going to try to remember that, and we'll make some variations in it later on. But right now, this is what we would call the block-in stage. I just want to get a color on the canvas to cover it up with the big shapes. And so we'll go back into it later on with the nuances and with colors that will help to create the illusion of some details. But at first, we want to look at our tonal values, and we want to get the big shapes in. So we're looking at the darkest darks, and then we're going to work towards the lightest lights. Here we go. And still, I want the consistency of the paint to be rather thin at this point. That will enable us to be able to go much darker and thicker later on in the painting. Right now, it's, if you've ever done any watercolor, that's kind of the consistency that we're going for. Trying to mimic some of these shapes and vary it a little bit. It's okay if I get a little bit of the colors running a little bit. That will hopefully create what Bob Ross called happy accidents, right? And that's okay as well. Nature is pretty chaotic, and it's certainly unplanned. And some of the best brush strokes that we can put on a painting happen as accidents. So he was definitely right about that. Then up the hill a ways, there's this area here that's fairly dark. Now we're just going to put the brush strokes to indicate this. It's always good to have the same color various places around your canvas and to paint all over the canvas at one time. So that way you're not trying to build up one section and then get that finished and then build up another. Uh, you want the painting to come together all at once. And in order to do that, sometimes you'll take the same paint color, even if you don't see that in other places, you want to find some place that you can use that the same tonal value in another part of the painting, which will help with the color harmony of your intended product. So here we go. There's this ridge here, and it's certainly darker than the others. So I'm going to kind of put this in. Varying the strokes. Okay. I also see a little bit of a ridge down here where the stream bed is meeting up with these mountains. So we're going to put a little bit of a line and see if that works or not. We don't want the line to kind of once again send us off the painting. So what I'll do is we won't take it all the way to the edge. We'll just kind of leave it like there. And of course we will constantly be rebuilding these colors. And one of the things that makes for a beautiful painting, by the way, is the number of layers you're putting down. And if you keep it thin and light, you can really build up different paint levels on top of one another, and it's amazing the kind of effects that you will get. Okay, so still in our darks, there's a lot of this dark purple, which is about the same tonal value as the brown that I put on here already. So we're going to look at producing a similar purple there. So I don't really have to wash the brush, but what I am going to do is pull that paint off of the brush using my paper towel. And see how there's still a little bit in there? That's quite all right. Now we're going to take a little bit of our ultramarine blue, stick it right here alongside of this to help judge our tonal value. And then, of course, to make purple, you need red. And we got two choices, right? We got burnt sienna, which we have in this mixture, and then we got the naphthol red. This is going to produce a much more vivid purple. So we're going to start out with this one, which is kind of what we see here. And of course, this is a reddish blue right now. Can't really see the purple, so we got to get just a little bit of white. You don't want to put a lot of titanium white into the mixtures. Start very small, and you can always add more. Now I'm squinting to see how this is pairing with that. This is still darker than that, so we'll add a little bit more of the titanium white. And notice how little I added. Now when I squint on my palette, that's pretty close. I'm going to put it just a little bit more. I think that'll do it. So now I think I'm going to regret not using a medium, but we'll see. I usually have liquid as the medium of choice here. Right now for the block in, I really would prefer to not have to use. I'm gonna put just a little bit of Gamsol here. The mineral spirits will help to spread this out a little bit. I may add the liquid as I'm thinking about it, but I will do the block in first, and that way, remember, uh, you always add more oil when you get closer to the finish of a painting rather than at the very start. Now we're painting alla prima, so it doesn't matter as much. If we were doing it in layers and taking days to do this, then you would need to be especially careful because this might completely dry before we come back to paint over top of it. And then you would need to perhaps oil it out. In other words, adding a little bit more oil on the top and then putting your next coat of paint down, and the subsequent layers would have a little bit more oil in them. But you certainly don't want to start out with a bunch of oil or you'll have some problems. All right, so let's back to sticking this purple in here. And of course, this is more vibrant than what we actually see in the photograph, but it's not a very good photograph. A little bit more of the mineral spirits. I'm going to vary these brush strokes, give a sense of movement, variety. Right. And at this point, I'm going to stop on this purple, and because these are lighter, I'm going to leave that puddle of color here. But I'm now going to go back and do some of the darker colors that we see in some of these areas, which are some greens. So we're going to do that. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and pull the color off of my brush with the paper towel. No need to necessarily use the mineral spirits yet on that. Having a little bit of those colors in the brush is okay. And of course, to make a dark green, we got several options here on this palette, right? We can use the yellow, which is the natural colors, which is the yellow ochre, and we could mix that with a little bit of ivory black. That would create a pretty interesting green. Or we could go high saturation with the Hansa yellow and the ultramarine blue, or any combination. We might do ultramarine blue and the yellow ochre. So my choice for these darker greens is going to be less saturated yellow, because as you go back in the space, yellow is one of the colors that drops out first. So it's not going to be that saturated. And rather than mix it down, we're going to use the yellow ochre. So let's start with the yellow ochre. Put that right next to this same palette area, so that way you can compare your values better that way. Now we take a little bit and just notice how little that is. Just a little bit of the ultramarine blue, and let's mix that in. There we go. And for this particular color, I'm going to put just a little dab of the Naphthol red. And that's going to dull that green down just a little bit. I can dull it down a little bit more if I want. And as I squint, that's pretty dark. It's about as dark as these other two colors when I'm squinting. Just going to put a little bit more of that red, just a little touch on the tip of that brush. Mix that in. And I think we're ready to go. I like that color. We'll get a little bit of the Gamasol to enable me to get this on the canvas panel. And now I'm going to turn my attention here. So I am seeing this color up here. And of course, we don't have the quite the color range, and that photo, it just looks dark to me. It doesn't even look like it even has a color, but it certainly does have a color. And hopefully you can sort of see this in the video, that it's a slight change between this color and there. Which will also give us some room to do some highlights and some other things to it later on. Remember, this is just the block end, so we're trying to get this set up for what will come later. And we don't have to cover everything. Sometimes allowing a little bit of the canvas underpainting to show through is also not bad. Now I also see this color over here in this area. I think I need a little bit more yellow there. I'll take a little bit more yellow ochre. Once again, varying the strokes, sort of looking at that mountain, trying to get kind of the feel of some of how it's landing. And see how that's sort of transparent because it's going on so light, that a little bit of the orange is coming through, which is fine. That gives us a little bit more of variety, which is nice. There we go. Now, here in this section, I'm seeing more yellow tones. So, one of the things that we can do is use the primary darks that we have here and lighten them up within the pool of color. We don't have to scrape that all off and start a new color. Instead, we can continue to mix into the pools of color that we already have. And it's one of the nice things when you start from dark and go to light is that you can lighten these up. Now to go backwards is a little bit is much more impossible to do, but because once you add titanium white to a mixture, it creates a very cloudy type of a color if you're not very careful, and so that's why starting with a lot of lights is not going to be all that helpful. But when you start with your darks, it becomes easier to judge your values as you make the pools of color next to the darker ones, or even mixing right into it, you can see the difference. So once again, I'm going to pull the color out of there. And because this color again is not that sharp, this yellow stretch that we're seeing here where the sun is shining on that, we don't have to get it super clean. And I'm still using this one brush. So we're going to make this mixture though a little bit warmer by using the Hansa yellow light. So I'm going to grab that first, and we're going to put it up down here next to our other greens that we had made. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the ultramarine blue. Of course, that's a very saturated green. I'm going to now take a little bit of Naphthol red, mix that in to dull that green. Now, this is still too dark. It's still too dark in comparison to that. So what I'm going to do now is take a little bit more of that Hansa yellow light, or yellow, instead of doing the titanium white. Most of the time, what happens when you make a mistake like this is you say, okay, how can I make this light? Oh, well, let's just add white. No, that's going to make a very cloudy mixture. It's not going to be very pretty. You want to reserve your titanium white mostly for your highlights and for your lighter sky colors, right? So don't reach for that yet. Reach for the yellow. Yellow is a wonderful color to use to lighten your mixture. So now I'm going to mix that in. That's pretty good, but I want it to be, it's still pretty close to that color. I'm going to take a bunch of it then and mix that in. There we go. That, I think, is a good color to start with. And think about it, it's still the block-in, so there's going to be opportunities to add some colors into it. So we don't have to be that careful. We're just trying to approximate these colors at this point in time. So got my brush done with this, and some of these look like they're more of a horizontal stroke. So we'll get the sense of a horizontal stroke by mirroring that with the paintbrush. And notice that we can mix into what we've already put onto the canvas at this point. There's some of these strokes. It's okay to mix it in. If you notice, it looks like some of that's mixed in at the very top there, and that's what I'm trying to sketch in as well. All right, so this is a little bit lighter. This is not exactly the color that I want, but it gives us a baseline to use, and then we'll come back and do some more refinement. Noticing a couple of areas here where I want to highlight that at this point. All right. And there's also, add a little bit more of the yellow coming off of this hill here. You can't really see it in that photo, but there was, believe me. Okay. And a sense of this, because this is where the focal area is going to be. So we want this to stand out a little bit more even now. There we go. Okay. All right. Now, what's the next darkest? So, in my estimation, it's probably going to be these rocks on the creek bed here or river bed, and we'll tackle that before we'll get into this area. Okay. So now, once again, just going to pull that color off using our paper towel. And I'm not concerned too much about making this super, um, uh, you know, clean again because I want some of this color to be a part of it. Now, This looks like a type of brown, so we've already got some mixtures here with some browns in it. Um, what I think we're going to do is start with some burnt sienna, a little bit of burnt sienna in between these. And that's kind of a reddish brown that we're creating there. Might be kind of nice. This is kind of drab how it really appears. Um, let's start with well, I'm going to add a little bit of the yellow ochre, see what that does. And now a little bit of the titanium white. And instead of reaching for ivory black to darken this color here, I'm going to put a little bit of the ultramarine blue in there. That's probably a little bit too much. Let's start with a small dab. And it's a little green, but there we go. Okay, I think I like that color. Get a little bit of mineral spirits to use. And we'll see how this works. Now, as we're close to the horizon, we can have our marks that are more horizontal. So that's what I'm aiming at here. Putting a couple of strokes like that. And same way here. Leave a few areas where we can put some lighter lights in there. There we go. Along here as well. Once again, this is right now consistency of what you might call a watercolor painting. Okay. Now, as we come forward, things get a little bit darker and a little bit more detail. So one way we can do that illusion is we're going to take this base color and we're going to add a little bit more of the titanium, the ultramarine blue, just a little bit into that mixture. Mix in some of these other colors. Get a little bit more of the mineral spirits on the brush. And come in here, and now I'm going to use vertical strokes for some of this. And I want it to be not very well thought out at this point. I want it to get some movement into it. Once again, this is the base layer, so we've got plenty of ability to come back in and paint over top of this if we desire to do so. A little bit of my Gamsaw here. I'm okay with it kind of dripping a little bit in these places. It might provide a little bit of nuance. All right. I'm just taking and removing that color from the brush. Now I will go ahead and clean it. Get all that color off of there. Because now we're going to turn our attention to those mountains and the lighter colors there. Starting with the purples and blues. Once again, finding a clean spot on my paper towel to get that off of there. Time for a new paper towel. Don't be stingy about your paper towels. You're paying for paint, you can pay for some towels. So always make sure that you've got a clean paper towel if you're going into especially a color that you want to make sure is pristine. So we're going to start with this purple that's already on my palette, and I'm going to add a little bit of titanium white, just a little bit, to lighten that color up. A little bit of the ultramarine blue back into it. As you go back in the distance, blue is the last color that disappears. So, and purple is created by red, right? So red drops out, and the color is going to become more blue in the background rather than purple, which I think you can see here. And we can always judge this. Sometimes artists will put a plexiglass kind of contraption and tape the painting to the back side of it. And then what you can do is, if you're testing your colors out, or even like this, I just touch that to that, and I can see that that's pretty good. That's about the color that I want. Get a little bit of Gamsol to help put this on there, and I'm putting it in this area here. There's a little bit of it up here. Transition. Mix up a little bit more of that, a bit more of the titanium white. Now this part, I know you can't see it on there because I made it up. I didn't like how it cuts in there. So this particular mountain is sitting behind this purple one. And we're going to give it a little bit more strength in the painting than here, because here it's just this little ridge. It almost mirrors this exactly, and that's not going to be very, very helpful to us. So instead, we're going to come up top here. Okay. Let's make sure that to be pretty strong there. Okay. All right. And now we've got these two mountains back here. And so just a little bit more titanium white. Not much. A little bit of ultramarine blue. That's a little too big, so we're gonna get some more titanium white here. Okay, there we go. I just wanted it to be a little bit different. See how that's, once you put it on the palette, sometimes you can see on the painting exactly if it's a different color or not. And the thing you got to get used to as you paint is that you don't have to have big shifts in color. In fact, sometimes the shifts are very subtle. And the subtle shifts actually make a painting look more realistic, right? There we go. That's a little bit. And this one is also about the same color. So I'm just going to go ahead and block this shape in as well. Oops. I can come back in and fix that. All right. So now we've taken care of a lot of these big shapes, right? Now, this same color, we're going to lighten up even more. And there are places in this sky where we are seeing the sky color, and then, of course, these clouds. So, what we're going to do is focus on these bluer areas close to the mountains here, and up the top. So, a little bit more titanium white right into that same mixture. And when you're applying paint to a brush, it's kind of helpful to go in a circular motion. That way, your brushes will last longer. By the way, this might be a great promo time to, if you enjoy the content so far, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out as we continue to grow the channel. And then if you like the content, give us a thumbs up. And if you have questions, by all means, drop a question below. I may not always stick the questions, for publication, but I will try to answer you if it's a meaningful question. If you're just going to um, troll me, then I will delete you. All right. So here's that color. Once again, a little bit of the gamma saw. And let's see if this is significantly different. There, I think so. And I can see that is different than what's there. So now I'm taking the edge now and I'm feathering this out a little bit. Is what I want to do. What I see is something similar to that. See this coming in from this angle. Cutting into that. I don't want to get too close to this mountaintop or it will look unnatural. So I probably will paint over top of that a little bit with the whiter shades of the clouds. But for now, that will do okay. And of course, the sky is one place where you can invent. No one's going to know what exactly the sky looked like at that particular time that you were painting. Is that maybe some other painters that were out there? Now I see some of this blue coming down from here. So I'm going to try to get some of that, or at least something kind of similar to it. Up here we want it to kind of feather out because we don't want any hard edges, of course, in the sky, do we? Okay. A little spot. I see a little spot over here. We'll stick that in. Then I see over here, as we're coming up this ledge, these clouds here are more purple. So I'm going to try to create that purple, still in this pool of color, by adding some ultramarine blue. So I'm going to increase the saturation. Of course, to make it purple, we need just a little bit of the Naphthol red. Going back in there with the Naphthol red to get that purple a little bit more. It's a little bit too purple. We'll use a little bit of the ultramarine blue to correct that again. All right, now that's way too purple, but let's now take some titanium white. There we go. Now this color right here, as I squint, it looks a lot like the other blue that we created. So I think we'll be in good shape. Do a little bit of the mineral spirits on my brush. And now we're going to start right in this area here is where we see it. So we're gonna, it sort of feathers into that mountain. So we're gonna, it's not gonna be clear where exactly the cloud begins and the mountain ends here. So and it's still probably a little too dark, but I'm gonna, we'll see. We'll see if that actually, I can always tone this down a little bit afterwards. So let's see this kind of pattern here. A little bit of a, so I'm barely touching the canvas with this color here. Here's where make it come into play on that mountain more. And even there especially, it looks like. And then it kind of comes up here, which is all right. Not taking it to the corner, but something like that. Here, and what I'm noticing now, and sometimes you don't notice this until you begin to cover the whole canvas, is that this color here probably needs to be shifted. I may take it out completely and just add the purple. It does. It's not. I don't think it's reading correctly. This spot here might be okay, but I think it needs to be a little bit more purple. But I don't have to change that right now. We still got some other lights to put in here first, and then we can go back and correct some of those areas. So now we're just gonna clean off the brush again. Here we're using white, so I want to clean it off really good. So I'm gonna dip it into the mineral spirits. Carefully. And then clean it on the paper towel. And to get some of the titanium white, we need quite a bit here for this effect. Let's stick it over here to create a new pile. And then you never want to put titanium white on anything without a little bit of other color in it. So we're taking a little bit of the Hansa yellow light. Not too much, just a little bit, so that this becomes kind of a sunshiny cream color, is what I call it. It will look whiter on the canvas than you might imagine. That's a little bit too yellow, so I'm going to put some more titanium white into that mixture. There we go. Because there's sunshine popping around here. Of course, my reference photo would fall off when we're discussing it. Let's see if we can stick that back up on there. Yeah, there we go. Good enough, I hope. So, if you can, hopefully you can see this on the video. Notice that this color next to that straight titanium white, it's not the same, is it? And that's what I mean. It'll help us out. Now, for this, we can go on a little thicker with these clouds. So I'm kind of scraping the surface. Because now I want more color on there. Now it's time to pump up some of this color. And that red color behind it, some of that's going to show through and that's going to be good. Want to look for patterns. We don't want patterns up here. We don't want to have a lot of strokes that look the same. So I'm concentrating on not repeating myself and using that photo reference as a kind of check on some of that. See, I'm just using the corner of the brush to just gently lay this in. One of the things I'm finding with these cheap brushes is that a lot of the paint is staying on the brush, which isn't too bad right now. There we go. Hopefully that looks light and airy. Get some more of that on there, but on this, where the edges of the clouds are, I want them to be not too harsh. I want them to be light and fluffy. And then in the middle of these cloud areas, I can get some more paint on there. A little bit of Gamsol as a medium here. So there's even a touch of some pink here, so I might focus over here first and leave this portion there so that we can vary a little bit of the color. Here in the sky, I'm just going to kind of get the clouds there at the top first. Does that make sense? And then go down from there. That cloud's coming down over there. And so far, I think this easel is working out really well. It does kind of wobble a little bit. As you can see me putting some pressure on it, it kind of tips, but you're going to have that. It's always going to be a trade-off between stability and portability, right? And so you have to kind of pick your poison. What do you want? Do you want a lot of stability? Then hike with a big old French easel on your back with about 25 pounds of supplies, or do you want to be able to hike in somewhere without back pain and with a very light setup of maybe 10 or 12 pounds and be able to save your back? And I know I'm doing this rather slow, but I find that if I rush too much on some of these, I start making patterns because I'm taking some shortcuts and I'm not carefully thinking about each of the strokes like I should be. So I want to give some variety here because especially now this guy might be just about done once I get this on there, and I would sure like to not have to go back into it too much. When you go back into things, the more chance of making it look um, too fussy, too fussed over, right? I guess that's the word. I can get a big stroke in. There, I can get a big stroke in. And now I'm taking that side of the brush again and just gently, ever so gently touching the canvas. Not really touching very much. I'm trying also not to get the paint that's around it on it too much, but it was so thin that I'm not really picking up any of that purple, or at least not too much of it, which is wonderful. It just is mixing just a little bit. You saw it there. And if you get some of that, there's two ways to deal with it. You can wipe your brush, but I would prefer just to put it back into your mixture and just mix it around in your palette until that color disappears, if it's just a small amount, and then you'll be just fine going back in. Otherwise, you might be dipping it into the Gamasol all the time, and that's not good either. Okay, so that's kind of good, I think. And we'll fluff some of those corners out even more with a dry brush approach after I've gotten this lay-in in. So, trying a new camera today, so I hope it's still taping. If it's not, I guess you'll get whatever I am able to get. All right, now we got some here. Bigger stroke there, bigger stroke there and there. Bigger stroke there and there. Save a little bit over here for that pink color. All right. Once again now, just going to go in and barely touch the canvas here. Got a little bit too much blue on there, so once again, go down and remix it on the palette to get that color out of there. Okay. The other thing that you probably noticed by now is that I haven't even changed brushes yet. This is still the same brush. And you can get away with that if you start with your darks and move to your lights, clean the brush when needed. So you don't have to travel with 50,000 brushes either, nor do you want 50,000 tubes of paint. All right, now here's where I see some pink. So what I'm going to do, I got this mixture of white still here. I'm going to take just a little touch of the Naphthol red. See how little that is? Hopefully, maybe you can see it. So now I'm going to take an edge here and paint that in there. And that's still, look how saturated that is. So I'm going to take some more titanium white and I'm going to dull that down. Now I'm going to squint to see when this color, I can't tell the difference between that pile and this one. A little bit more. Okay, now when I squint, I can't tell the difference. So I know that's about right. Now, coming with this pink. And some of this pink is actually coming up in here. So what I'm going to do is just kind of lightly pull it across it. I see it here, so I'm going to pull that across there. I see it in here, so I'm going to pull that across there a little bit. I see this little pink color kind of over here too. Pull it across a little bit. And even here a little bit there, all across that area. And then I'm seeing it a little bit there too. So we're going to stick this in there a little bit. There we go. All right. Now, check and see if I've covered most of the canvas in that area. I think I have. I'm going to take and pull that color off of my brush. Of course, all the time we've been spending on this area here, let me just check this top edge. I'm pulling that up a little bit. Okay, that's good enough. Has allowed a little bit of time for this block end to kind of dry since it's so light in there. I'll get another paper towel. Clean my brush off now. And now, let's stick with the same brush. What I'm going to do, I'm going to get this really dry. I want to get it dry as I possibly can. And then I'm going to pull this through some of these areas so that we can kind of feather out these clouds. It's not bad where it is now. I could live with that, but I want to get a little bit different effect here. So let's try this. And the way that I do this is I kind of step back from it, and I get my sense of how I'm going to feather it in terms of the movement of my brush before I actually touch it. So think about feather dusting. What I'm doing is I'm going to feather dust certain areas and hope for the best. There's some risk, of course, like they say, you sometimes have to take a risk in order for something to happen, and it could go badly. But this is oil paint. We could go back in over top of it if I really mess it up. Okay, so here we go. And once in a while, what I'm going to do is I take this and I just wipe those colors off again and start again. Just feather dusting on the surface to take away some of those edges. Now, see here, I've kind of obliterated that mountain there, but that's not bad because that's actually what I see over there, right? So maybe I had a plan all along. All right, so there we go. Push that a little bit. That's a little bit lighter. Okay. Once again, taking and removing some of that paint. And now I want to get that going here. Don't want to do it too much, just a few places. And there we go. I think that's pretty good. Like I said, there's still this ridge here. I'm going to come back in with the darker purple and color that in purple, this whole area here, down to here. And then I need to, I want to refine the shape of this little mountain here. I kind of obliterated it on that last pass, but those are all fixable. I'll keep these piles here. I'm going to come down with a few little cloud details in that section there. All right, so that's going to be the next step here. So I'm going to clean this brush off so I can, because this is going to be a darker color, so I don't want any titanium white in here. So I want to get that off of there, clean my brush up. And then here in this purple one, ultramarine blue, get enough on my brush here because I'm gonna need it. A little bit of the Naphthol red into that mixture. And that's a really dark purple. A little bit more of the red. And now just a little bit of titanium white at a time to pull that back a little bit. Okay. I think that looks good. A little bit of Gamsol, since I'm not gonna fool with getting the medium out at this point. And now I'm coming along this edge and reshaping this. See how we can erase what we put down earlier without too much problem. Do that here as well. I want this to be a line.